And we're live. Yeah, so today it's just me again. I guess Nita is having a flare up and she had to go to the doctor um, to get that taken care of. I guess she overextended herself working on her garden. Trying to block out the neighbors. So let's all wish her well. And hopefully by next Monday, she will be back in as full of a form as she always is. So it is Monday, April 27th. And finally, we're having more appropriate springtime weather for it being almost May, considering that several hours before it felt like more November weather. So I am definitely waiting for the weather to finally pretend it's spring until it decides to go straight to summer. So that's the setup for today. And so it's just going to be you guys and me just talking, just yapping. So I guess I might as well just get all this started. So as always, I am never quite ready for this, but we're going to do it anyway. See you on the other side. Let's see. Yeah, you see, it's so much easier when Nita's around. Now I have to push all the buttons myself. Oh my goodness. So hello everyone. Good morning. Well, and welcome to another edition of the Ragin to the Vlogs show. This time with just one person. Like I said, Nita had a doctor's appointment this morning, so she's not going to be joining us today. But like I said, everyone wish her well, so that, like I said, next Monday we'll kind of sort of be back to normal. So so who is joining us today? Let's see. Oh, hello, Lou. Hello. Always, it's not a chat until Lou is in the chat. There you go. And yes, I see you, our beautiful eyeball people watching from regions beyond. If you are joining us from Facebook, welcome. And while you're there, why don't you come on over to YouTube and join the sexy people in the chat? Keith Blue and Little Dixie, hello, company. And while you're here, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever any of our shows go live. Even though we did a show last week, it feels like it's been like 7 weeks between shows. So please excuse the mess. That is how I run things here, because like I said, it's a lot easier when Nita is taking care of the background stuff and I'm just able to yap, but that's not the case. So like I said, it's like, just bear with me as I just try to get my bearings here. Oh, and look at that, and I even forgot, I guess today's kind of like theme-ish video.
See, this business is filled to the brim with unrealistic motherfuckers.
I felt that, considering the topic, this was rather appropriate bump for the episode. So might as well get all this started. So hello, everyone. My name is Daphne Lage, and I'm a cartoonist, illustrator, and comic book artist, self-publishing fantasy comics since 1992. I am known for the furry fantasy adventure Tall Tales and the medieval fantasy drama Egoraven, Heir of the First Unicorn. Both you can read online at my website at egoworks.com, EGOWORKS. Also, speaking of Egoraven, I just want to thank everybody who supported the issue 12 campaign. For those of you who don't know, Egoraven is a 16 issue series, and we just completed the campaign and the fulfillment for issue 12. I have just 4 rewards left. Those are all sketch covers that I have to work on. So those are the last 4 before we completely close out the campaign. But pretty much everybody else should have all their books. I sent out the last of the packages. I dropped them off at UPS this morning. So everybody should be getting, if they don't have their physical copies already, they should be getting their physical copies within this week. So like I said, there's 4 books, there's 4 rewards left that I just have to do to finish off the campaign. But for those of you who missed out on the campaign or are now curious about the campaign and the story, the pre-launch page for volume 3 is now live on Kickstarter at egoraven.com. Just click on that. The link is in the chat and in the show notes. Show notes, the thing at the bottom. You guys all know where it is. So Egoraven, Heir of the First Unicorn, is the story of a unicorn princess exiled into the mortal realm who trains to become a knight, hoping to win a king's favor and save her people. This is for volume 3, which collects issues 9 through 12 of this 16-issue series. And if you missed out on any of the previous issues, volumes 1 and 2, as well as the individual issues, including some special variant covers, are going to be available on this campaign, and it should be launching soon, although I don't have an exact date yet. But right now you can hit on the link for the pre-launch page and you can click on the notify me button so that you get notified when the campaign goes live. And I hope that everyone can appreciate my first Zhang Brothers variant cover that's in the image. You get a little teaser there, and I'm very excited to have that also on the campaign. Also live right now, actually this one is live, is Adventure Finders, Rod Espinosa's Adventure Finders, which is the very first collaborative book with the Indie Comics Network. So what it is that Rob is in the Philippines and he can't run Kickstarters from there. So we collaborated with him to run a Kickstarter for this originally Patreon exclusive webcomic that he's been doing. And it's going to be collected in a trade, in the first volume trade paperback in both hardcover and softcover editions. It's a kind of like a Lord of the Rings meets a Game of Thrones with an anime twist as small town kids venture out to seek fortune, serve the realm, and chase adventure. So the link is in the chat and in the show notes as well. So that's pretty much what's going on in terms of housekeeping. So that's what's going on right now. So check out the links in the show notes and in the chat for all of the campaigns that I just mentioned. So what else? What else is going on? Well, so Monsterotica is coming up in about 2 weeks. And for those of you who are just new, or you're not familiar, or you forgot from last year, Monsterotica is a adults only convention that specializes in monster smut books. And I was able to attend the first one last year, which I had a overwhelming yet pretty good time at. I brought home a lot of books from there, and I was able to meet some authors that I regularly read before then, and then also met some new ones that have become, favorite authors as well. So I was able to score a ticket for the second year convention, which is, like I said, coming up. Is it next week already? Yeah, I think it's next week. So next Thursday, I think, is going to be, I'm going to go to Baltimore for that convention. So, I haven't been driving myself as crazy as I did last year. Last year, I had put a lot of pressure on going to this convention. And I kind of like the personal stuff that I had wanted to accomplish. I kind of like failed at. I chickened out on actually like giving out portfolios and business cards, networking. I chickened out on networking at the convention. And and it's like, and I had a whole year to kind of like think about it. So, so this year I decided I'm going to try it again, but I'm not going to put that much pressure on it, on myself. I'm going to so what I did was so last year I had made some bookmarks and stickers and trading cards. And I think the mistake that I made is that I had them all separate. And I think that because everything was separate and I had wanted to give people choices as to what they wanted, I ended up overwhelming myself. And in the end, I didn't I didn't give away anything, essentially. I think maybe I did like a couple of trades, but that was it. So this time around, I decided to simplify the process. And what I did was I combined all the bookmarks and the stickers into this just little kind of like this little snack pack thing. And I'm going to treat this like my business card because it does have my information on the tag plus a QR code that goes to my website. So so the idea is that I'm going to give these to the authors that are there. And and it's like, just a little, a little a little gift pack, right? That will serve both as a portfolio, as a business card, and also just, giving out stuff at the show. So by combining everything, I was able to narrow everything down to 25 packs. I think it's about 25 packs. I didn't do a final count on it. So, so if I give one to everybody, at every table that's there, I should be fine. So, yeah, the little small potatoes. Yeah. Last year, there was literally part of the gift pack, the gift bag that I got for being an attendee. Someone was giving out little plastic potatoes. So there's a little potato. If you go into my Facebook, if it was so silly. If you go into my Facebook, if you visit my Facebook page, Jesus Christ. If you go to last year's Monsterotica, you will see a photo of that tiny potato. And to tell you the truth, I wouldn't be surprised if that potato, showed up again at the show. So looking forward to it. I will definitely keep everybody appraised as to what vegetable will show up in the gift bag this year. So like I said, I'm trying not to overwhelm myself. I do have books that I pre-ordered that I'm going to pick up at the show, so that'll already give me It'll already give me it'll already, well, that this one's a given. This one's a given. Although there is one thing that I regretted not getting at the last show that I am hoping this, because I know this particular dealer is going to be back at Monsterotica. And there's a particular figurine that I regret not picking up, that I'm hoping that they have at this show, that this time I'm going to pick up. Screw it. I'm going to pick it up because I've regretted it ever, since last year. So I'm hoping they have this too. Lou is putting out all the emojis, all the appropriate emojis. So like I said, I'm trying to, like, so I have, books I have to pick up. So that'll give me the opportunity. It's like, oh, I enjoy your book. So have a little, have a gift pack on me, that type of thing, and at least this time now I know what to expect. Lou is growing an entire garden in the chat right now. So, at least this time I understand how, like, the weird part of the convention, as if it being monster smut isn't enough. Because the one thing that kind of really threw me off, compared to, like, going to a comic book convention, is that the dealer's room and the author's room are the same room. And it seems that at author conventions, they close the dealer's room. They close the author's room for several hours. Like the room is only open for like a couple of hours, and then they close it for a couple of hours, and then they open it up again, because what that does is that it allows the authors to, like, go to panels, to actually network with the other authors in the same room, to have a proper lunch. Like it's like, on one hand, it's really convenient if you're, an author there. But on the other hand, it really threw me off, because I thought I had all day to, like, talk to everybody, and instead I only had a couple of hours, and mind you, when some of the lines to pick up books, to pick up pre-orders were like 45 minutes, you really don't have a lot of time to do much. I know that BookCon, which I think was like last weekend or the weekend before, and there was a lot of issues that I was hearing about BookCon. But I think that this had more to do with very elevated expectations that the people going to the show really shouldn't have had. And I guess, like, the big thing is that, so you have like these, so you have like the author signings. And it seemed like a lot of people were really mad that there were limited tickets to see these authors. But it's like, yeah, you're talking about, they're only giving away like 100 or like several hundred tickets for a signing, but like 2,000 people want to see that author. And it's like, people were mad, like, why couldn't they see every, like all the 2,000 people? And it's like, Jesus Christ, it's like, imagine having, and then it's like, on top of that, right, these are the same people who want like a very interactive, very interactive engagement with these authors. So how long do you think it's going to take, for an author to actually see 2,000 people in a weekend, Oh, hey, Rob. Rob says, as an author, I would hate that, because I would have less time to sell unless they close the vendors for equal time to make up for it, which I think that's kind of like the idea. But BookCon was just like people were downright mad. Like, they were like, felt like there was like a certain level of entitlement that I thought was like a little crazy, that it's like, I like if you go to San Diego Comic-Con, right? And it's like Frank Miller can only sign, like they're cutting off the line at like 300 people. Right. I mean, you got to make sure you're on that line early. You know, it's the same thing when you're going into Hall H, right? Hall H, I don't know how many people Hall H can hold, but I mean, people are lining up the day before to make sure they get into Hall H, and then they end up living in Hall H for the entire time, just so that they don't miss out on the main, whatever the big thing that's going to happen in Hall H, the big presentations. But like, imagine Hall H is every individual author, you know, and it's like, and I had like a really hard time like reconciling with the entitlement that these people had, you know, because it's like, because then another author got blasted online because she spent time, like too much time, or they felt like, oh, she wasn't nice enough to a person online getting a piece of paper signed, you know. And it was just like, you know, it's like everyone's like brain rotted, you know. I mean, it's just like, you know, really, it's like, so what it was that this author, like, so someone comes up to her with a blank piece of paper, and the author was like, takes the paper, he goes like, oh, so how do you want me to sign this? Right? Like, how do you want, you know, it's like, what do you want me to do with this? Right? And a lot of people took that as rude. It's like, oh, that's fucking rude and blah, 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 and this, that, and the other thing. How dare you? Right? But the thing is that what other people were explaining, especially if you're not familiar with author signings, is that sometimes people will come up with blank paper like that, and they want a very specific thing. Like, what it is like, okay, you're going to start off signing this, and I'm going to get every author here to sign this same piece of paper so that they can frame it as a souvenir of the show. But I guess people who are not familiar with the process, you know, thought that the woman asking, how do you want me to sign this, was rude. And which that wasn't the case, especially if you saw the video. You know, and then it's like the whole thing about, oh, you spent too much time with this person, you spent too little time with this person. Meanwhile, these are the same people who want this author to engage with 1,999 people behind this woman. Right. So that was the thing that was kind of like a turnoff, that it's like, really, you know. So Monsterotica is a much smaller show. Like, it's only like, they limited the tickets like I think like 200 or 300 people. So that's it for the weekend. That's all the people that's going to be there. And like I said, I lucked out with getting a ticket. So so they closed the author / dealers room for like 2 hours. It's a 2-day show. So out of those 2 days, like, I'll be lucky if maybe I get like 5 hours of time in the dealer's room. You know, maybe I can get like more time if I actually go Saturday and Sunday. Friday and Saturday. It's only a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday show, and Thursday is set up, so that doesn't count. So I figure if I make it a point to come Friday and Saturday, and probably actually go to panels when the dealers room are closed, then I think that I will have a better experience at this second show than I did on the first one. So, you know, so in honor of, you know, preparing for going to this show, and also it's kind of like, so last week I was also talking about wanting, you know, like thinking about doing a separate interview show that would be more creative based than business based. You know, because it's like I have just gotten to a point where it's like I am just really so over like the whole comics as a business thing, indie comics as a business thing, right? I'm just like so completely over it, and I just want to engage with creators who are just as excited as creating for indie comics as they are reading indie comics and enjoying indie comics. Like I'm more interested in creators who actually enjoy this environment rather than creators who only see this as a means to an end. Where it's like they're only grinding through comics because they don't know what else to do. They don't want to call it a hobby. They don't want to admit that this is just a hobby that they're just grinding through, and that they but they really have no real interest in indie comics as a whole, which I have been coming across a not insignificant amount of people who feel this way, where it's like, where it's like they're in indie comics, but they don't necessarily like indie comics. Like they like their own stuff, but it stops there. And I don't see the point to that. Like I can't relate. I can't relate to that type of attitude, because it's like, how can you expect me to want to enjoy your indie comics when you have such disdain for an uninterest, if not disdain, for everybody else's stuff? Like you want people to support you, but you don't want to support anybody else. Like, talk about entitlement, right? That you're coming into the indie space with the entitlement of everybody supporting you without you having to give back. And the ironic thing about it, that these are the same people who talk about, oh, community, but they don't want to be a part of the community. It's like they just want the benefit of community without being a part of it. And I'm over these people too. Little Dixie says, please, would love to hear creators' process of making comics. Tired of hearing all about the marketing side. No, I agree. I am just like I said, just still kind of like sorting things out on my end, like how I'm going to present it. Like I do have a couple of ideas as to how I want to set it up and the graphics and everything. I have some graphics. Like I said, I'm still kind of playing around with it. And also it's like, I kind of have to like build the wherewithal to actually do it, because it's like, it's like, I still have like all this other work to do, and this is just another thing I'm adding to my pile. But it's like, if this is something, if this is something I really want to do, then I have to make it a priority. It's like, I can say, like, oh, I want to do this, but until I actually do it, all this yammering doesn't mean anything. And that's also another thing too, that I'm kind of like a little very weary of in this space with these, like, I guess, like wannabe, creators, where it's like, yeah, they talk about community and the love of the, the love of the game, the love of the book, the love of indie comics, but their actions don't match what they're saying. It's like, they say that it's like, oh, yeah, I love indie comics, but you never hear them talk about indie comics. You never see them share campaigns. You never it's like you never see them like actually like maybe like review other people's books or like talk about what indie comics they picked up. Like, not even like something as simple as posting pictures of their indie comics hauls. Like they do absolutely nothing, but they want me to believe that they're sincere. Right. And it's like, yeah, yeah. So, and then also it's like, digging, it's like, so Lou says, I can't do what I do without being into the characters and stories. I've been inspired by more independent creators than any mainstream stuff out there. Right. So that's like the side that I want to explore, and talk about, the creative process, right? Because it's like, when way too many people think that, oh, just prompt something, who cares? It's like just recently, it's like there was this fucking chud that pretty much said that thinking that art and books have souls is mental illness, that it's like that's ridiculous. They're just inanimate objects. It doesn't mean anything, right? But it's like, sure, when you're talking about generative tech, that doesn't mean anything, and that's the only thing you can do. Yeah, of course, you're going to try to convince everybody that actual art doesn't mean anything. And it's like, sure, yeah, okay, bro, it's like that's kind of like, this is somebody who can't tell me anything. So why should I listen to them to begin with? you know um it's like, and sometimes, like, even when you have creators who are paying other artists, to write, to draw for them and create these books, there's still a level of like, oh, well, this is just something I'm paying for. It really doesn't mean anything. And it's like, and I'm just throwing shit on the wall until something hits. It's like, you know what? You're just as uninteresting as the Gen Tech guy. You're just as uninteresting as the slop guy. It's like, because like you have nothing to say about what you're paying someone else to create, paying somebody to create this, right? When all you're seeing it as like, oh, this is just a marketing opportunity. And it's like, okay, I'm, like I said, so I'm kind of like done with it. So part of the inspiration for what I'm thinking about doing is a blog that I follow on Substack called Monster Romance Reviews. And this is a woman who, I think her background is in like research and marketing. I think she's an analyst more than a marketer. She's a data analyst. And what she's been doing for, it's EJ Reads and Writes. I know I put the link in the show notes. And what she's been doing is that she's been interviewing all these different authors from monster romance. And then it's like, after 43 interviews, she's pretty much brought together all the data to put together this kind of like this master blog that she put together. Now the thing is, I don't pay for the actual detail that she goes into, so this is just a free post that she that she put together. And so we're just going to get kind of a superficial look as to what data that she was able to collect from these 43 authors. And and this graphic kind of like sums up the information that she got out of interviewing everybody. So, Anatomy of a Monster Romance Author they have a crazy creative brain. They love collaborating with fellow creatives, and everything that they work on genuinely excites them. And just this graphic alone is like the antithesis of what I keep coming across in, I guess, like, I don't know, the marketing end of the marketing sphere of indie comics. It's the complete opposite. Because it's like, honestly, it's like everything that this one graphic encapsulates, I am very hard pressed to find it from other creators in this sphere. And it's like, and when I do find creators that match this, it's very, very rare. I mean, it's very, it's a very, where the other thing, it's not insignificant. This is kind of insignificant. The amount of people in indie comics that I meet, that I've come across, that actually kind of like encapsulates this idea that I'm chasing, so, so she starts off. Over the past year, I've published 43 author Q&As, Q&A spotlights here on Monster Romance Reviews. These are the people writing your favorite orc smut, tentacle romances, and sentient object love stories. So I think that's what the potato goes from. So potato romance stories. Let's see. I started these interviews because I wanted to know who's behind the books that have quietly become one of publishing's most interesting phenomena. 43 conversations later, there are clear patterns. What draws writers to monster romance? What keeps them up at night? What do they dream about? What makes this subgenre unlike anything else in publishing? And you would think that these questions, actually, these questions would translate perfectly into indie comics, but it's really funny that when I have tried to ask these questions, the resistance that I would get is just kind of weird, and that's something that I would want this interview show that I'm percolating to kind of like really force through, that it's like, stop talking to me about your book in marketing terms and start talking to me in terms of why you love this, but genuinely love this, not in terms of, oh, well, I have a hole in my IP catalog. Next, let's see. So as she says, I did what any self-respecting analyst nerd would do. I reread all of them, grouping patterns I was picking up. I also ran the Q&A info through some Python code to count emojis and other stuff. So yeah, there's this whole thing about emojis. And then I sat with the results and asked myself, what story is this data actually telling? Right? And then it's like she goes into the big takeaways. So let's go to the big takeaways. And let's kind of go through this, in terms of, what I see in indie comics. So the big takeaways are that monster romance authors are overwhelmingly readers turned writers. Right to market sounds boring. You're just catering to whatever's hot at the moment, and that's kind of like how Jose or would say that it's like those are your professionals, where it's like they're given a task, they write the task, they get paid for that task, and then move on to the next task. That's their thing, right? So writing to market, that's what that is. So they're but we're not talking about people who do that. We're talking about people who, they love the genre, couldn't find the story that they wanted, and wrote it themselves. So they found their own, kind of like that Junji Ito cartoon, This Is My Hole. And I'm, it's like, this is my hole, it was made for me. Although we could read this so many different ways. But so that's where this starts. These are people who look at a genre that they enjoy, see that there's something that they want to read and don't see it, and decide, okay, if I want to see this, I have to do it myself. And that's exactly what they do. And yes, if that impulse sounds familiar, you're apparently further along the pipeline than you think. Right. And, and it's like, and that's, those are the, and that's, and that's the thing. They're not talking about, oh, there's a hole in my IP catalog. They're talking about, there's something I want to read. No one else is doing it, so I have to do it. And they take that initiative on themselves to create this book. And then they create the book and find out that there are other weirdos just like them to, that want to read this as well, right? Again, you would think that this would be a common story in comics, so but that's that's not a story that I hear a lot, or at least on the marketing angled shows that that I kind of sort of watch. Usually the story is, it's like, oh, I enjoyed this and I wanted to make my own because I want to be popular like that. It's like, oh, my Batman but different, my X-Men but different. And and it's like, I don't know. It's like, to me, it's like, like when I hear these stories from, these other, it, I don't know. I don't get the same type. I don't get like the same sense of like, I enjoy this, like, it's just kind of strange, I don't know. Now, yesterday I was talking to Jose about this, right? And I told him, it's like, look, there was a particularly frustrating show that I listened to yesterday, and I was telling Jose, it's like, you know what, it's like, it's like, I hate to say this, but it's like, I really do think, I really do wonder if this is literally a demographic thing, where it's like, or actually, like, this is split among gender lines, because it's like, it's like, I'm getting this frustration from from, I don't even want to call it a community, that's that's pretty much male dominated. And I don't know if it's because I'm not seeing, I just can't relate to why they're doing this. And I'm not getting a sense of they're excited about their work as much as it's like they're excited at the fantasy version of their work, i.e. the IP that leads to a Netflix deal or this, that, and the other thing, like it has different like the motivations are too different. That, I don't know. So and then the other thing, right? So the next big takeaway is creative freedom is the genre's defining advantage. The relative lack of rigid conversations means you can experiment with anything here: creature types, power dynamics, relationship configurations, and sexual content in the way that would be risky in other romance subgenres. Authors cited this freedom as a significant reason for loving the work. And it's like, you would think that in indie comics, right, it's like we would have that same advantage. Actually, in indie comics, we would have the same advantage. We have the advantage of not being IPs, right? This is the thing where it's like, you have people complaining, why don't they do this with Batman? Why don't they do this with Wonder Woman? Why don't they do that type of story? And it's like, and the problem is I think they kind of like miss out, is that you're not talking about characters anymore. When these books reach a certain level, when now it's like, you're not talking about Marvel anymore. You're talking about Disney. Right. And mind you, and Disney just laid off like 1,000 people from the creative staff. I mean, it's like just recently, and Marvel specifically. It's like, now you're not talking about characters. You're talking about corporate IPs. And you're talking, it's like, and in the end, what you're looking at is just logos that are character shaped. You're not talking, these are not characters that these companies really want to do anything with except tell very safe, generic stories that move product. And we're talking about product that's not necessarily the comic. In fact, it's like, the way, like mainstream comics have been shrinking, and the way that Marvel's been pretty much, like playing around with licensing rather than producing their own stuff. I mean, that's kind of, I wouldn't be surprised if Disney eventually decides that it's like, why do we even need comics for when we could just license it out and and not do comics ourselves. We don't need to do this. We want everyone to go to the movies, right? So, but the ironic thing about it is that like then you have people who go, it's like, oh, I'm in indie comics. Let me do where you can do anything you want, and then all they're doing is just doing the same thing that a corporation is doing, right? And it's like, and that doesn't make any sense to me, where it's like that here you're in a space where you can do whatever you want, and what you're doing is the exact same thing that a corporation is doing, because it's not really the characters you care about, it's the fame and the money and whatever it is you think you're going to get from catering to an incredibly broad market that you have no access to because you're an indie creator. So that's also the strange thing, where it's like honestly, I think that the one creator that stands out for me that really understood the assignment, right? If you want to talk about like a name that everybody knows who when they did indie, they really understood the assignment, was Jack Kirby. And it's like the fact that none of these studios will translate Kirby's artwork literally, although they did it in Thor, but not really. It's like they still tried to keep it safe, right? And it's like, and like I remember interviewing a guy. He did Octopus Cowboy, right? He did this book called Octopus Cowboy, and it's literally just that. It's an octopus that's a cowboy, right? And I asked him, it's like, why did you decide to do Octopus Cowboy? And his answer was, why not? And it's like, here's a person who understands what comics is, what indie comics is. That it's like, if you can't indulge in the absurd, then it's like, why are you, it's like, it's like, then what do you think the medium is for? Right? It's like, that's why I don't understand people who do their comics, but like, oh, it's kind of like, this is how it would look like as a movie, right? And they literally draw their comics or create their comics with the limitations of modern filmmaking. And my question is, why would you do that? You don't have to do that. It's like you can make the craziest thing, put in anything you want in these books, but you still want to limit yourself to what reality offers, right? But that's because it's like they're not looking at their comic as a creative outlet. They're looking at their comics as a stepping stone to larger media. And they're limiting themselves to that, or they're catering to that. They're pretty much doing the equivalent of catering to market, as opposed to really taking advantage of the medium, right? But that's also this could also be a skill issue too, where it's like, if all you're doing is looking at what mainstream is doing, maybe your imagination is not as expansive as it's possible to be in comics. So I don't know, but then again, I am talking about books about werewolves and and minotaurs and stuff. So it's like, how expansive could that be, right? But but the thing is, though, is that it's the fact that these authors are not regulated by traditional media, by traditional publishing standards. They're not catering to a wider market. They don't have editors going, this will not sell in Portland. This will not sell in the Midwest. You have to change this, or you have to change that. Because they're catering to a very niche market, they could pretty much do whatever they want. It's like they don't have the restrictions that writing to a wider audience would force them to do. It's like would for like an editor would force them to. So they take advantage of that. The next one is the community is genuinely collaborative, not competitive. This came out loud and clear. Monster romance authors like each other, support each other, and treat another author's success as a rising tide that will lift up their boat too. If you're coming from a genre where other writers feel like rivals, you may experience some culture shock, but in a good way. And this is the one that really stands out for me in terms of the big difference between what I've seen when I was at Monsterotica and seeing it in person. Seeing authors literally running up to each other and like gushing and loving each other's books. Like, oh my God, I read that. It's like, oh my God, I loved it. Like just seeing those interactions just between the authors, right? A genuine excitement that I don't see in indie comics, and again, it's like there's all this talk about, community. We got to build community. But again, everybody wants to be a villager, but it's like everyone wants the village, but nobody wants to be a villager, right? They want community as long as somebody else is doing the support and they're just taking. They want they love it when people come up and say, oh, I love your work, but they'll never do that to somebody else. Usually what you'll hear is like, oh, I don't have time to read other comics. I don't have time to read, other people's books. But if it's something from Image, if it's G.I. Joe, which is making like $3 million on Kickstarter, if it's like, the latest issue of Spawn, if it's something from Marvel and DC, they could tell you all day. They could talk to you all day about that shit. But when it comes to other indie creators, oh, I don't have time to read. But you have time to read this other stuff. Well, because the collaboration that, the community that they want to pretend that they're in, that's what it is. They're pretending they're in a community that's fake to begin with. Because the people who do end up supporting each other, what I see is that they end up separating themselves from everybody else. So it's like you end up with like these little niches where very specific creators end up just supporting each other, but not the community as a whole, right? But not indie comics as a whole. And, again, a lot of yapping, a lot of talking, but not action, not a lot of action matching that yapping. But like I said, when I went to Monsterotica, the excitement just the authors had with each other was palatable. It was in the air. Some words I can write without a problem and use it correctly in a sentence, but to actually say it, right? And I really don't see that here unless the other creator makes more money. Then all of a sudden everybody wants to like latch onto that creator as if like the money from that creator will flow down to them somehow. And it's just like, it's more like coattail. Like I see more coattail behavior rather than genuine interest with each other. So, and I think that it was very important when she said that monster romance authors actually like each other. And And then I look at indie comics and it's like, you know what? I really suspect that a lot of indie creators don't even like the books that they're making. So how am I going to expect them to like other creators? You know, like I said, like, and in terms of like they don't like the book that they're making, it's because they're looking at their books as, oh, this is just IP creation. And if it doesn't make X amount of money on Kickstarter, it's a failed IP, but now they feel committed to it. Oh, I'm committed to a failed IP. And that's what kind of like it feels like. And also the reason why a lot of creators also, Jay, just stop working on this stuff. It's like, oh, you know, well, it didn't work out. What didn't work out? You know, it's like, but the thing is though, it's like, I think that like a part, like the big difference between authors and indie, you know, like indie comics creators is that authors have to finish a book for this to work. There is, no matter what author, no matter how many volumes, right, a series might have, if there, even if there's multiple, the author still has to complete a book. The first, even if it's the first volume, it still has to be a complete story. You know, because there's plenty of first volumes I've read that I felt I didn't need to move on to the next volume, because the first volume, I got everything that I needed out of it. And you know, and it's like, I don't need, I can take it or leave it. You know, it's kind of like, I read the book The Magicians, right, by Les Grossman, I think is Jose recommended the book. Absolutely excellent book, right? And I read the first volume, the first book. I think it's like a 3-book series. I don't remember, 3 or 5. I don't remember. And I read the first book, and Jose was like, oh, so when are you going to read the second one? And it's like, oh, I'll get to it when I get to it. Like, I didn't feel the need to have to go into the second volume because I got so much of what I wanted out of the first one. So it was a complete story. It was a complete story on its own, right? And with these authors, they have to have a complete novel to get this process started. There is no, releasing, just chapters, unless you're on Patreon. Because I've seen authors do that they release chapters on Patreon and then they collect the novels, and they collect everything in a novel form that they put out for the next convention or whatnot, right? But with a lot of indie creators, they barely get through, maybe like the first 3, although Jose says that what he's been seeing is like the first 5 issues. And then it's like, and then they either continue, they either keep going or they fall off after the 5th issue. That's the pattern that he's been seeing on Kickstarter. And I've spoken about this before, that it's like the big problem that a lot of like indie writers have is that they just come up with the idea for the first issue and they put all their effort into getting that first issue out because, oh, I have a great idea, let's get this out. And then it's like they're only working on this story as they go along. Like, they're not writing a complete story and getting like a real idea as to like how long the story is, how many issues it's really supposed to be. Because I know that my biggest frustration is like creators who say with their full chest that their series is like 112 issues, or it's 80 issues or it's 50 issues. And it's like, bro, you're putting out an issue a year. Like, what do you mean your shit's 80 issues? It's like your story is 80 issues. What do you mean by that? It's like I have to wait 80 years to get your entire series. Don't be ridiculous, right? It's like even if you were doing 4 issues a year, it's like, really, you're asking me to invest 35 years? Is your story really that long? Does it really need to be that long? What's going on in these issues that your story sounds like it's too long for the story you have? And it's because like, it's all up here. It's like, no, write it down. And that's the difference with these authors. They have to write their story down. And if they want people to really engage with the work, it has to be complete. You have to have a complete novel. And also the other thing too, the thing about like liking each other, it's like, is the fact that they're actually willing to actually collaborate with each other, both creatively and administratively. The amount of authors that I saw who were actually also assistants to other authors at this show was surprising. Like, you would have authors, like you have the main author there, and then you have an author. They're not there selling their book. They're not sharing a table. They're there as an assistant to this particular author only because they're fans of this author and they became friends. And now they help each other at conventions. Where it's like they're answering, they're the ones, like helping the author while the author is doing the signings. They're selling at the table. They're selling the author's work. They're sending everybody to the websites. They're, sometimes they handle admin stuff, when they're not at shows. I mean, it's like real collaboration. I mean, that type of collaboration would blow my mind in indie comics. Like, I've never heard of such a thing. That's not something that I see happening in indie comics, and then it's like, let's see. And then the other one, this one I think is the one thing that we all have in common. Discoverability is the single biggest challenge. I think that every single one of us have in common. Monster romance authors don't sweat their craft, stigma, or not finding their niche. And that's funny too. They don't care. They write their weird shit. They know it's weird and they run with it. The hardest part is getting your book in front of the readers who would love it. Multiple authors, including some with substantial catalogs, described marketing and visibility as their most persistent struggle. The internet is a tough place like that. So again, that story doesn't change. Everybody has the same. Let's see. Melissa, hey there. Man, that's such a bummer because I love seeing my fellow creators and reading their comics, and I love screaming about my favorite indie series. Yeah, but like I said, I kind of wonder how much of this divide is gendered. That it's like that guys see each other as competition while women in creative spaces see each other as collaborators. That it's like, because honestly, superficially, that's what it looks like to me. That it's like, I watch enough of these marketing shows and it's all of these guys pretty much, it's a dick measuring contest after a while. You let the conversation go long enough and everybody's dick measuring, and trying to one up each other and like, well, my campaign made more than yours, so my book is more important than yours and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not what I saw at Monsterotica. That's not what I see on author forums. It's people. And not only that, but these authors are more than happy to recommend and review other authors' works. And they will do like collaborative giveaways, and like they literally, they can see, they could all be writing the same thing. Like I said, everybody has a Beauty and the Beast story. Everybody has a Minotaur story. Everybody, like, now the whole thing is like merman stories now. That's the big trend now in this space. Everybody's writing merman stories. Nobody is considering each other competition in the merman space. In fact, they're all collaborating with each other to sell each other's books to each other's fans. Oh, if you love this mermaid story, you're going to love this merman story written by this author. You like orcs? There's 7 authors at this one convention writing orc stories. Minotaurs, we got you. Aliens, we got you. They're there. There's 17. There's 17 of them. you know? Um, like there is, it's like, yeah, I don't see that whole, oh, well, that one sucks and that one sucks and that one sucks. Like, oh, read mine is better than that. And I don't see that in this space. Mind you, when you start, like I've seen that when you start moving outward, when you have those authors who are trying to like be more mainstream, right? Which, and then you start seeing all this behavior that I'm seeing in the indie space, because they're not really interested in being indie. They're interested in being mainstream. So they're going to start acting like that to get into the mainstream space that requires traditional attention, traditional mainstream attention. Right. So that's, is it a coincidence? I don't think so. Let's see. But the one thing that every indie author and every indie creator, I think we can all agree on, that marketing sucks. Marketing on the internet's hard. And like even these, and even some of the, like they said, that it's like they have a back catalog a mile long. They're USA Today bestsellers, whatever that means. And they have a hard time. They constantly have to grind to get their books in front of people. So that doesn't change between the two. That we know. That's the same for everybody. This is also the other one that I think there is a difference. Financial sustainability is possible, but not guaranteed. And authors are honest about that. The range of revenue is wide. Some authors are building towards full-time careers. Others simply are not, despite having multiple published works. Going in with realistic expectations and long-term plan matters. And that part also is, I think that there's a huge divide between what I see in indie comics and what I see with the authors. The authors are very accepting of the fact that they may never have a sustainable career on this, but they're still going to write these books and they're still going to do what they need to do. But a lot of them, that's like, you know what? It's like my husband supports me. I work another job, or, whatever it is, it's like that they understand that they're more likely to not have this as a full-time career than they do. I mean, there's a real, there a lot. I think that they're a lot more realistic with their expectations of what they're doing, of their creative output, than I see in indie comics. It's like with indie comics, way too many people, it's, I'm doing this until I get a Netflix deal. It's like, oh, I'm going to be the next Image. It's like this, that, and the other thing. It's like, oh, it's like, I'm doing this so that I can make this my full-time career. But then they're doing, but they're ignoring the signs that are telling them this is not going to happen. It's like, it's like indie comics, it's all about that fantasy version of what they want to accomplish, where in the novel sphere, in this novel sphere, everyone is very realistic as to what they're doing. They know the limitations, they know how hard it is, but they're going to do the work anyway. They're going to do these novels, they're going to get it out, and and they're going to do what they're going to do. Like I said, they either have a husband supporting them, or they have, they have a job aside, like they have their main job and they do this on the side, but they're more realistic as to what that they can accomplish. While in indie comics, a little bit, there's way too much magical thinking. And I posted this thing online that it's like everybody wants a magical solution to their problems, but nobody believes in magic. So yeah, so indie comics has a magical thinking problem. That people that these guys think that they could just manifest their way to a Netflix deal, and that's all they need to do. While these women here are going, it's like, nah, that'd be nice if it happens, but we're setting this up as if it's never going to happen. And then this is another one that I think that there's a big divide between the authors and indie comics. The genre rewards authenticity above all else. Authors who write what genuinely excites them, however weird, however niche, consistently describe stronger reader connections than those who try to write to market. Again, readers are connoisseurs of authenticity. They are looking for stories that can match their freak. They will show up most for writers who are clearly having fun. And authenticity is also something that I think is missing a lot from the indie sphere. That way too many people are getting into indie comics to create an IP, Batman, but different, than really to create something they actually enjoy. I was talking about an interview with 3 directors as to well, if you didn't have an audience, would you still do this? Right. And they had you had one author, you had one director who said, of course, I would continue doing this. One author who said, absolutely not. What's the point? If my creative output doesn't have an audience, what's the point of it? And then you had the middle ground where it was, I forgot the director from Pixar, where he said that on one hand, it was his responsibility to create to market, but at the same time, it had to be a story that he had to really like because he was going to be working on that story for 3 years. So he really, really had to like that story, even though he had to create that story within the parameters of making an IP movie to market for a corporate market, a corporate landscape. And I think that, overall, Pixar does have that success in merging the two. It's kind of like sincere stories with corporate expectations. And I think that a lot of creators in indie also kind of miss that, where they just look at catering to corporate expectations rather, and kind of forget the whole, you better like this shit because more likely than not, you're not going to see a Netflix deal. More likely than not, mainstream is going to ignore you. So you better like this. And that's where I get the idea that a lot of creators don't like their stuff, because again, they're just focused on the Netflix deal that's going to come any day now, rather than, it's what if I never get that Netflix deal? Do I like this to continue it? And again, that's why a lot of creators end up dropping off. She goes more into detail about it. Again, creative freedom is the genre's superpower, and she goes more into detail about that. Let's see. The freedom goes way beyond creature design. Authors keep describing monster romance as a space where they can explore power dynamics, gender roles, sexuality, and consent in ways that felt authentic rather than constrained. Also, you could kind of flip genres and, just like I said, it's just do whatever you want without having to worry about whether an editor is going to go, you can't do this in a book. And it's yes, I can. And you can't stop me. Let's see. The other things here, it's inclusivity is structural, not performative, which unfortunately is what corporations do. They do performative inclusivity as opposed to actual, because again, everything's an IP, everything's a selling point. It's not authentic. It's just a way, it's just enough of bait to get you to buy the product. And they're able to avoid that. It's like they don't need to cater to that. But again, you have a lot of creators who, a lot of comic creators who, again, they're just creating indie versions of corporate books and then wondering why they're struggling. Again, the community is the secret weapon. Everybody actually likes each other, which is something that, again, I'm not convinced of in indie space, in indie comic spaces, honestly. Okay, so here we go. What you're up against, the real challenges. Discoverability is brutal. We can agree on that. Financial sustainability is a genuine concern. Most authors don't expect themselves to even see that in their entire careers. But at the same time, readers expect professional production quality, right? That it's like, no matter what you do, people are, even as an indie book, people are still going to expect a professional quality book out of you. And here we go. The dream is not what you expect. When authors talked about their ultimate goals, the most common answer wasn't hit the bestseller list or land a big 5 deal. Too off-brand for this crowd. No, the goals got personal. The dream of many of these authors is cult fandom, which I found interesting. They want people to make fan art. They want fan fiction of their work. They want someone to get a tattoo of one of their characters. Let's see. Netflix and streaming adaptations came up a lot, but even those felt less like commercial ambitions and more like wanting to see their worlds fully realized. But again, it's like, it's kind of like that was more like lotto thinking rather than they're hedging their bets on this. Like, oh, it would be nice, but we're not counting on it. I mean, it's like, they don't reject institutional validation so much as it never even comes to mind. Like I said, it would be nice. But this is the origin story pipeline had a few familiar stops. This part I found really funny. Pretty much everybody cited how in comics everybody says Todd McFarlane, right? Or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In Monster Smut, it's Ruby Dixon, and she is responsible for this book, Ice Planet Barbarians. This is the book that pretty much set the entire genre on its way. Like, I don't know if she was the first one to do it, but this is the book that hit cult status and pushed, I guess, like this whole monster romance thing to the forefront. Let me just say that if this woman ever decides to do a comic book based on this, we are all fucked. Because your indie faves will never. So let's hope she never decides to do a comic book and put it on Kickstarter, or else we are all in trouble. And like I said, it's like, so a lot of people base, so it's like, so there's a lot of people, again, who were inspired by this book and made their own, right? And, and it's, and the thing is, and they're not afraid of wearing that on their sleeve, kind of like, oh, this is Ice Planet Barbarians, but different. What's funny is that it's not really different and they know it. It's like, well, this is inspired by Ice Planet Barbarians. It's just my version of it. And I know that it's Ice Planet Barbarians. So they kind of enjoy, like I said, Disney's Beauty and the Beast was another one that every author has their variation on it. Even I have a story in progress that's based on that. Oh, and what's really funny is that how in this is the thing that we share. How in indie comics, people say they got into indie comics because of because of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Guess what? That's kind of that's the same inspiration too in Monster Romance. Way too many of these authors read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And they also said, but instead of saying, oh, I'd love to do, it's like, so instead of like people go, oh, this is cool, these women were saying, I'd hit that. So that was a surprising overlap between indie comics and monster smut writers, that we both cite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as an inspiration. And gargoyles. And then, of course, Twilight, Underworld, Interview with a Vampire. Those are teenagers. Look, the other thing that all these women have in common is that they all wrote fanfic, right? So, it explains a lot. But again, it's about like they wanted stories that didn't exist, so they had to write it themselves. And yeah, and it's just kind of like, so this, like I said, this is kind of like the basic idea, like I said. So I'm reading this thing, right? And I'm reading about like just how, this genre of writing is just like so chaotic. And it's like, everybody's writing the same thing, but they're doing their different take on it. And there's a certain joy in that, and it's like, and they want you to read each other's stuff. And, and that's the thing that like there is, so it's like, so when I went to Monster Erotica last year, that sense of community was very apparent to me just by watching the authors interact with each other, that I don't really see at like traditional. I mean, I can't even say conventions anymore because they've changed so much now. Like conventions, comic book conventions have become so corporate and so like not comic book conventions anymore, that like it like to see, like there are people who literally go to comic book conventions and are shocked to see comic book artists there. Like what kind of community can you build at these conventions now, right? But yeah, so that's kind of like, so that's the frustration that I have with, that kind of like gave me the whole idea. It's like, what? It's like, again, it's like, if I'm not seeing something in the space, I'm going to have to do it myself. And now it's like, now it's just kind of like just putting it together and actually just doing it. Yeah, I probably should just grab Lou and Melissa. Just like, hey, let's start doing episodes. See what happens. You'll be my first 2 episodes. And just see, what happens, and just kind of like, like really push, like, because my whole thing is that are we in this environment because we feel forced to interact with each other like this, as like, we're all competition, or we're all, it's like we're all against each other and it's a zero-sum game. And if someone's succeeding, it means someone else is failing, or, oh, I can't succeed unless you fail. Like where is this attitude coming from? Where is this like, who's pushing this? I see it, and I see people acting with each other, but it's like, where is this coming from? And can we change it? Can we, can we push the conversation so that people don't feel the need to think that, oh, that money is the only way that can validate me. You know, that it's like, no, it's a job well done. It's a comic well done. It's a book well written, you know, and that people enjoy, you know, that's where the validation should come from, you know, because look, we've seen shitty books make 6 figures on Kickstarter, and we've seen really good books barely make $1,000 on Kickstarter. So the money is not nothing, is not anything. Doesn't mean anything. It just means, all that means is that you raise that money on Kickstarter. It doesn't mean your shit's good, but it doesn't mean your shit's bad either. You know? But what if we were to like change the conversation, you know, and kind of like, you know, yeah, it's like, what does this mean to you? You know, forget about the money. Like if you were in front of a fortune teller right now, right? And it's like, oh, Madam Leota, where, you know, it's like, you know, will I be a successful comic book creator with a Netflix deal and, you know, shaking hands, you know, hanging out with Todd McFarlane or whatever the fuck, you know, whatever it is you want to do. It's like, will that ever happen to me? You know, will I ever be a success in comics? And she looks at you and she goes, absolutely not. It's never going to happen. This is all you have. What you're accomplishing right now, this is it. This is all you're going to see. You're only going to have 100 backers or whatever on Kickstarter. You're never going to see a $10,000 campaign, and you know, your books are just going to be here. That's it. Right? What do you do with that information? Like I said, for me, it takes the pressure off, you know, but it doesn't stop me. It literally doesn't change what I'm doing. But how many people would go, oh, if this is it, then I'm not going to continue doing this then. If you can tell me for certain I'm not getting anywhere, I'm not going to get anywhere with this, then why bother? And it's like, maybe those are the people that need to go. You know, I mean, it sounds a little cruel, but the thing is, though, it's like, if you're not enjoying this and your motivation is just hinged on the dollar amount, you know, it's like, what are you doing? Right? I mean, that's the question I'm always asking. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? You know, it's like, you know, the monster smut girlies have no problems doing the work and accepting the reality of what they're doing and still enjoying what they're doing anyway. You know, why do so many people in comics don't? You know, it's like they don't enjoy what they're doing. Everything is hinged on something completely outside of their interest and control. And again, it's like magical thinking that I think like kills a lot of creativity more than it encourages it. So, you know, so it's like, yeah, so that's pretty much my rambling. So I was just reading this blog and it was kind of like, yeah, why can't we be like that? You know, why can't we, you know, like be this actual community that we keep saying we are? Yeah, Imaginos. Oh, it's like, okay, caught you on the tail end. They forget why they're doing it on a personal level. Yeah, they do. You know, if there ever was, you know, but sometimes I suspect there never was a personal reason, you know? I mean, if this is something you want to do, you'd want to do it anyway, right? I mean, really, right? It's like, you got to enjoy what you're doing regardless of where it goes, right? That's the whole point of indie comics. If you wanted to work at Marvel, go work at Marvel. You know, if that's what you really wanted to do, go there. Do what you need to do to go there. But like, don't be in indie comics pretending, you know, and then like being all resentful and shit because things are not working out the way you want. because again, too much magical thinking. But I don't know. That's just that's my thoughts. And it's like, you know what? It's kind of a thing that I've been thinking about for a while. So, so any final thoughts? Final thoughts for anybody? Any final thoughts on this? Since I don't have Nita to kind of, point at and ask, So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Right? I mean, it's like, I had one of my young studio mates think comic creators make $100,000 a year. And I'm like, who told you that? Yeah, who told you that? I mean, I guess if they're a regular at Marvel or DC, again, like these are like mainstream numbers, but very particular creators in mainstream, maybe, I mean, but yeah, it's like, that's not the regular. That's not usual. That's not normal. Not anymore. Nobody's making like really careers like that at Marvel anymore, I don't think. I mean, it's like, Jesus, like I said, Disney just fired 1,000 people from Marvel Creative. I mean, it's like, who's making that money? Who's making that money? Yeah. So yeah. So like I said, any final thoughts? So those are my rambling thoughts. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that there really is that much of a gulf between novel writers and indie comics that we can't find, common ground? Let's see. Most parents tell kids that anything that don't make money don't make sense. Well, that's true. That right. I mean, but do you think that the gulf is too wide between the two attitudes? Like, can we kind of like build a more realistic base for indie comics to stand on? If we just decide that it's like, what, it's like the money's nice, but if I just wanted to make money, I'd get a job, that whole thing. I mean, I don't know. Right now, it's like, yeah, I think at this point I'm just rambling and running a little over. So, so thank you everybody in the chat for keeping me company today. Like I said, everybody wish Nita well. Like I said, she's at the doctor's today. So hopefully next week we can get back to our normal schedule-ish, type of thing. And yes, and thank you so much to everybody, all the beautiful eyeball people watching in the background, listening to me in the background. You could listen to anybody else. God knows you can listen to Spotify. You can get me listening to Spotify, but instead you're listening to me rambling about Monster Smut. Imagino says, we have to stay focused on what started us on the road to begin with in the first place. Absolutely. That's a good way. That's a good thought to end the show on. But yeah, it's like you guys could be listening to anybody, but instead you're listening to me. And I appreciate everything. I appreciate that from everybody. It's like, I appreciate that. And yeah, and I hope you guys got work done. If you're listening to me in the background while you're working, I hope you guys got work done. I certainly need to get work done too. So yeah, so yeah. So thank you everybody for joining me today. And if you want to learn more about me and my artwork and my Kickstarters and everything else, you can head on over to my main portfolio site at egoworks.com, EGOWORKS, where you can read Egoraven, Heir the First Unicorn for free. But if you prefer your fantasy to be more of a furry Lord of the Rings adventure, you can follow the link over to Tall Tales. That's TAILSonline.com, and read the archive of over 100 hand-drawn pages there. That'll definitely keep you busy. And of course, if you, and don't forget to sign up at this QR code or on the website itself. You sign up for my newsletter. You can keep up to date with all of my new art, my sketchbooks, comics, and Kickstarters, and you get a free PDF comics bundle just for joining. So hit the QR code here or sign up on the websites. Last but not least, remember Adventure Finders, Rod Espinosa's fantasy adventure book is on Kickstarter right now. The link is in the show notes. And if you're waiting for the next campaign for Egoraven, Egoraven Volume 3 is also, the pre-launch is live. Make sure to go over to egoraven.com. The link is in the chat and in the show notes. Hit that notify me button so you get notified when this campaign goes live as well. So Adventure Finders is live now and is funding right now, and Egoraven Volume 3 is on pre-launch. So don't forget to check that out as well. So thank you so much again for joining me, keeping me company, and in the words of the ancients, eat your food, moisturize, mind your business, and do the work, because when you actually do the work, you never have to fake any of your accomplishments. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you next time.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
I told him I can be fine.